"Sir, other passengers are saying they're uncomfortable," the flight attendant said, looking at the man trying to settle into his seat with his prosthetic arm. "Maybe we could move you to economy plus?" The man nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. But just then, the pilot emerging from the cockpit saw the small pin on the man's shoulder and froze. That pin was an insignia that only members of a very special military unit could wear. And 10 minutes later, the entire flight crew would be standing at attention before that man. Welcome to Unseen Heroes Archive. Before we begin this powerful story, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive. James Mitchell, 34 years old, was born and raised in a small town in Montana. Since childhood, he had been fascinated by the sky. Every time a plane passed, he would look up and watch until it disappeared among the clouds. His biggest dream was to become a pilot, but his family's financial situation wasn't sufficient for private pilot training. After finishing high school, he realized that the only way to fulfill his dream was through the military. In 2008, at age 18, he joined the Air Force. His goal was simple: get pilot training and fly in the sky. He completed basic training at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. He didn't struggle with physical tests, but the real challenge was the mental endurance tests. Becoming a pilot wasn't just about learning to fly. It also meant being able to make decisions under pressure, work as a team, and maintain composure in critical moments. In his initial pilot training, James's instructors noticed his natural talent. He wasn't just technically good, but also had an instinctive understanding of flying. Maneuvers that other students struggled with, James accomplished easily. In 2010, after completing advanced pilot training, James received his first assignment, F-16 Fighting Falcon pilot. This was far beyond his dreams. He would be operating one of the most advanced fighter aircraft. He received his first operational assignment in Afghanistan in 2011. He was stationed at Bagram Air Base. His mission was to provide air support to ground forces and conduct reconnaissance flights. Serving in Afghanistan was completely different from simulator training. Here, every flight carried real threat. The Taliban's air defense systems weren't advanced, but James and other pilots made decisions that were vital for American forces waiting on the ground. The first month passed quietly. James flew with experienced pilots trying to learn the field. Squadron leader Major Patterson was a disciplined but understanding man. It took time for him to trust James, but as he saw the young pilot's determination and skill, he began giving him riskier missions. Everything changed on that cold November morning. In Helmand Province, an American convoy had fallen into a Taliban ambush. A support request came from ground forces. Urgent air support was needed. James and his wingman, Lieutenant Rodriguez, immediately took off. When they reached the area, the situation was much worse than expected. American forces were under fire from 3 different points and had no chance to withdraw. The Taliban had positioned themselves in strategic locations, targeting American vehicles with heavy weapons. Eagle 1 to ground control, James reported on the radio. "I can see the target area. Enemy positions identified." Ground control to Eagle 1, immediately air support needed. "We have wounded." James quickly scanned his F-16 systems. He precisely identified targets because American forces were very close to enemy positions. One mistake would mean friendly fire. On his first pass, James precisely hit the enemy machine gun position. The explosion temporarily stopped Taliban fire, but the problem wasn't over yet. On his second pass, James noticed something dangerous. On his radar system, there was a missile signal coming toward his aircraft. The Taliban must have had more advanced air defense systems. "Rodriguez, evasive maneuvers," James shouted, while turning his aircraft in a sharp maneuver. The missile missed James's aircraft, but passed very close. The shockwave affected the F-16's electronic systems. Suddenly, red lights began flashing on James's control panel. Eagle 1 to base, electronic systems partially down, switching to manual. But James didn't give up. With manual control, he made a third pass and neutralized the remaining Taliban positions. Ground forces managed to withdraw safely. Returning to base, James's aircraft had suffered serious damage. He wasn't sure if the landing gear would work. An emergency landing procedure was initiated. Eagle 1, you're cleared for emergency landing. Fire crews standing by. James used all his experience to land his aircraft safely, but during landing, a part of the aircraft broke off and hit James's left arm. The pain was terrible, but he managed to stop the aircraft safely. When he was taken to the hospital, doctors realized the damage to James's left arm was very serious. The bone was crushed, nerves were damaged. He underwent 3 surgeries, but was told he would never be able to use his arm fully. But worse, his career as a pilot was over. The Air Force removed James from operational duties due to physical limitations. When James received this news, he was devastated. The purpose of his life was to fly, and now it was taken from him. But his commanders offered him another option. He could become a flight instructor. Mitchell, Major Patterson, said, "You're an experienced pilot. You can pass your knowledge to the next generation." James accepted this offer. If he couldn't fly himself, at least he could teach others to fly. For the next 3 years, James worked as an instructor pilot at Nellis Air Force Base. He trained hundreds of young pilots. He taught them not just flying, but also taking responsibility, working as a team, and making the right decisions in critical moments. But in 2014, due to military budget constraints, training programs were reduced. James had to accept early retirement. When he returned to civilian life, James's only goal was to pursue a career in commercial aviation. Despite his prosthetic arm, he was determined to get his civilian pilot license. After 2 years of intensive training and physical therapy, James obtained his commercial pilot license. He had limitations. He could only operate certain aircraft types and needed co-pilot support, but he could fly. In 2016, he started working at SkyWest Airlines, a small regional airline. Initially, he worked as a co-pilot, then became captain of regional jets. James didn't see his job as just a profession. Every flight was a small victory for him. Despite his prosthetic arm, he safely transported hundreds of passengers. But civilian aviation was very different from military aviation. Here, passengers were customers, and customer satisfaction was paramount. James observed that some passengers became uncomfortable when they noticed his prosthetic arm. Most of the time, nobody said anything. But sometimes, passengers who saw the prosthetic arm would ask flight attendants, "Is the pilot safe to fly?" James heard these but didn't say anything. He did his job in the best way, conducting safe flights, until that Tuesday morning, they would fly from Denver to Chicago. James was serving as captain. His co-pilot Sarah Williams was a young but experienced pilot. Before boarding began, James performed his routine, checking the flight plan, getting weather briefing, checking aircraft systems. When passenger boarding started, James liked to exit the cockpit and check the cabin. This allowed him to make brief eye contact with passengers, showing them who their pilots were. When he came out to the cabin, his prosthetic arm was visible. Most passengers didn't notice this, but some passengers in the front rows paid attention. One of them, a middle-aged businessman, frowned when he saw the prosthetic arm. He whispered to the woman next to him, "Look at that pilot's arm. Is this safe?" James heard this but ignored it. He returned to the cockpit and began takeoff preparations. But before takeoff, senior flight attendant Jessica Martinez called James. "Captain Mitchell, a passenger expressed concerns about you." "What kind of concerns?" "About your prosthetic arm." He asked questions about flying safety. James sighed. "Jessica, I'm an FAA certified pilot. I have medical clearance. My prosthetic arm doesn't affect flight safety." "I know, sir, but the passenger is very insistent. Maybe you could talk to him." James hesitated. Usually he didn't have to deal with such situations. But today, that businessman's resistance had begun to affect other passengers too. "Okay, let me talk to him." When James came out to the cabin, he found the businessman. The man was in his 50s, wearing a suit, with a conceited manner. "Sir, I heard you have concerns about me." The businessman straightened up. "Yes, you have a prosthetic arm. Does this affect flight safety?" "Sir, I'm a fully certified pilot. My prosthetic arm is approved by the FAA. I've been flying commercial aircraft for 8 years. But in an emergency, you need to use both hands. Passengers around began listening to the conversation. James felt the situation could get out of control. Sir, my prosthetic arm is fully functional. I flew F-16s in Afghanistan. I assure you, your safety is my priority. The businessman's facial expression changed. Afghanistan, yes sir, I was an Air Force pilot, but the businessman still wasn't satisfied. Well, I paid for business class. I don't want a disabled pilot. This statement broke the silence in the cabin. Some passengers looked at the man in shock, while others seemed to agree with him. James's face reddened, but he didn't raise his voice. Sir, I'm not disabled. I'm a veteran. Same thing. I want another pilot. Just then, co-pilot Sarah came out of the cockpit. She had heard the situation. Sir, Sarah said, Captain Mitchell is one of our most experienced pilots. I'm honored to fly with him. But the businessman looked hesitant. Which war? James answered, Operation Enduring Freedom, 2011-2012. What kind of missions? Close air support to ground troops. The businessman's facial expression softened a bit, but he was still suspicious. Passengers around were listening to the conversation with curiosity. Just then, a voice rose from the back of the cabin. Captain Mitchell? James turned around. An elderly man sitting in economy class had stood up. He had a cane in his hand and was struggling to move. Yes, sir? The elderly man slowly moved forward. I'm Staff Sergeant Robert Chen. I served in Helmand in 2011. James's heart raced. Helmand? Which unit? 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. We were attacked in a convoy on November 15, 2011. He remembered that date. Robert Chen continued. 2 F-16s came to rescue us. One of the pilots experienced electronic systems failure, but completed the mission. If that pilot hadn't been there, none of us would have made it home. The cabin fell completely silent. All passengers were listening to Robert Chen. Sir, James's voice trembled. That pilot was me. Robert Chen felt his eyes welling up. I knew it. I never forgot the Eagle 1 call sign. At that moment, the atmosphere in the cabin completely changed. The businessman was looking at James in astonishment. Robert Chen continued, You saved my life that day, Captain, and the lives of 11 of my friends. James approached him. Sergeant Chen, doing that mission was my job. No, sir. You became a hero that day. Just then another voice came from the other end of the cabin. Captain Mitchell, I was there too. Another passenger stood up. A young man in his 30s. Corporal Martinez. Same convoy. Then another, Sergeant Williams, from the medevac team. And another, Private Johnson, radio operator. Within 5 minutes, 6 veterans were standing in the cabin. All had been in Helmand that November day. All remembered James's life-saving intervention. Robert Chen approached James and gently touched his prosthetic arm. Sir, how did you lose this arm? On that mission, during emergency landing, tears streamed from Robert's eyes. While saving us, the silence in the cabin deepened. The businessman's face had turned ashen. Just then, one of the veterans in the back slowly placed his hand over his heart. The others did the same. 6 veterans were showing respect to James. Then, something unexpected happened. Other passengers in the cabin began to stand up too. One by one, all passengers were standing. Applause began. Slow, respectful clapping. Then it grew stronger. James's eyes filled with tears. This was one of the most moving moments of his life. Senior flight attendant Jessica sent word to the cockpit. To see this moment, co-pilot Sarah also came out to the cabin and was mesmerized by the scene she saw. The businessman was still in shock. He slowly approached James. Captain, I apologize. I didn't know. James looked at him. Sir, you didn't need to know. But now you do. I'm ashamed of making such a mistake in my life. James put his hand on the businessman's shoulder. Sir, we all make mistakes. What matters is learning. Robert Chen approached James. Captain, flying with you today is a great honor. For me too, Sergeant. Applause started again, this time even stronger. Flight attendant Jessica was crying. Other cabin crew members were also experiencing emotional moments. James turned to the passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, today you have all honored me. I will do my best to deliver this flight to you in the safest way. Applause erupted again. When James returned to the cockpit, co-pilot Sarah looked at him. Captain, that was amazing. Sarah, I'm just doing my job. No, sir, you're a legend. The flight was one of the smoothest flights in James's career. Everything went perfectly. During landing, passengers applauded again. When they landed in Chicago, Robert Chen and other veterans had prepared a surprise for James. They all took photos together. Captain, Robert Chen said, I'll never forget this photo. Me neither, Sergeant. The businessman also approached James. Captain, if I ever have the chance to fly with you again, I'll consider it a great privilege. Thank you, sir. In the following days, some passengers from that flight shared their experiences on social media. Videos went viral. James suddenly became a nationally recognized figure. But James tried to avoid this. He had just done his job. A week later, the CEO of SkyWest Airlines called James. Captain Mitchell, I'm hearing wonderful things about you. Thank you, sir. We want to promote you. Chief pilot position is open. James was surprised. Sir, this is a big responsibility. We need a leader like you. James accepted this offer. But in his new position, he maintained the same principles: humility, service, excellence. 6 months later, a delegation visited James. Robert Chen and other veterans had come together to prepare a special plaque for James. Captain, Robert Chen said, we founded a veteran support foundation in your honor. This wasn't necessary. Heroes like you shouldn't be forgotten. The plaque read, Captain James Mitchell, hero in the sky and on the ground, not disabled but differently abled. James hung this gift in the most visible place in his office. Today, James still works as chief pilot at SkyWest Airlines. His prosthetic arm is no longer a handicap, but a symbol of courage. And on every flight, James remembers this. Real strength isn't in overcoming limitations, but in creating excellence with them. This story isn't just about a pilot's story. This is a story of overcoming prejudices, recognizing true value, and that no hero deserves to be forgotten. When James Mitchell was subjected to that businessman's contempt, he seemed hopeless. But in reality, he was the most valuable person on that airplane. Have you ever known someone like James, or someone like Robert Chen, who shows respect for the past? Share their stories in the comments. At Unseen Heroes Archive, we continue to share such real stories. Don't forget to subscribe, because every story hides a different face of courage. Because the greatest heroes sometimes sit quietly in the cockpit, but their past is as boundless as the sky.